Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Today, I'm super excited to talk with Chris Brundrett of William Chris Wine Company. Chris is a graduate of the Texas A&M Horticultural School, and in 2008, he founded William Chris Vineyards in High, Texas with Bill Blackmon. Today, they farm 90 acres for William Chris Wine Company, which produces about 60,000 cases for its 5 brands and supports more than 130 families. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Drew.
Oh, thanks so much for being on. So, Chris, graduating from Texas A&M back in the day, how'd you get your foothold in the industry?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's important to start with, I was like a lost soul at Texas A&M and had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was, frankly, like a little stoned in entomology class one day. And I was like, this sounds great. And decided like, oh, entomology is the way to go. And so the study of arthropods and bugs and really loved that. But I quickly, after a year and a half, was like, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I was waiting tables through college to put myself through school. And one of my tables, my call tables that I waited on every week, they said, man, do you ever go to the wineries in the hill country? And I was like, what? What's the hill country? And I'd been driving through Fredericksburg. I grew up, 2 hours away, 2 hours west, in cotton country and sheep country. And, I knew what Fredericksburg was in the hill country, kind of, but I didn't know there was wine there. And I visited a couple of wineries, and it was about the third. It was 3 out of all 5, right? Back then, there was only about 5 wineries in the hill country, probably like 20 in all of Texas, and if you could even call them wineries at that point, I don't know. But there was a guy who had just opened up, and he took us in the back, and we tasted out of tanks and tasted out of some barrels, and he showed us how, the real like just 5-minute tour of the wine industry, and this light bulb popped in my head and was like, you should quit partying so much and do something with your life. And it was like a lightning bolt that struck me, and I'm so grateful for that moment. And I try to, even my business today, I really try to think about that a lot, because potentially we could be the next spark for somebody to really have that jolt, that moment. And I get to see folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s that have never had that moment, that finally get that moment late in life and say, hey, I really want to do this. And I'm really grateful for that shock, if you will.
What was it about it? What was that aha moment that really struck you?
So I thought a lot about farming. I don't come from a farming background. My parents are farmers. My dad's he was a Delta Force helicopter pilot and a U.S. Customs pilot after that. My mom's a nurse practitioner. And I'd always done a lot of gardening and tractor work and ranch work growing up, and worked for a bunch of ranches and worked for some big gardens and picked watermelons. And I was really fascinated with that team aspect of farming and like taking something and feeding somebody with it, which I think is why I loved the restaurant business so much. And not that it's a bad thing. I thought very seriously about doing culinary as a living and maybe going to culinary school. But I saw the family that I worked for, ran several restaurants, which I was a floating waitager, going and waiting tables and managing people and all that good stuff. And at the end of the day, I'm still like serving people's food, and not that that's a bad thing. It's just, I wanted something a little different. And I do the same version of that, right? I still serve wine all the time and get to share that experience. But for me, I think it was just finding that right thing that really sparked my interest, that kind of wonderful blend of science and art and history all wrapped up into one. And that, I think that one of the coolest things about wine is they're like baseball cards for adults, and you can
Oh yeah.
drink them. And I think that's the
I love
coolest
that
shit on the
comparison.
planet. There's different seasons, different vintages,
Uh-huh.
right? And then you can, like there's one of arguably like what the best restaurant in the world is maybe in Mexico City, right? But he can't take all that shit in a bag and like ship it to you and have that
Uh-huh.
experience. But you can do that in wine, which I think is like one of the coolest things
Yeah.
ever. And you get a very presentable package that is really represents and expresses the year that it was grown and the people that grew it and the people that were on that team that year. And I just think that's so fantastic. And um, for the most part, we get to make people's lives better with wine.
Mhm.
And I think that is I'm so grateful for those times. I mean, I don't personally, I appreciate all the press and the accolades and all that other crap that comes with it. But, and I shouldn't say crap, it is great. And I love it. But, the stories that I get from our fans that are like, your wine is something that we love to open up with our family, and it brings our family close together. And we have it on, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and on Tuesday when I have a bad day or when I have a great day and I want to really do something special, and I get to open up some of your wine, and it makes our life better. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the shit that I love, man. Such a gift to be able to do that for a living. I just really cherish it.
Absolutely.
Um,
I like the experience. You're emphasizing the experience in the bottle, and the fact like in Mexico you can't transport the whole restaurant over, but you can actually carry the expression of the vineyards through the bottle. Last week or a couple weeks ago, I was talking to Jennifer Frayburn at Lassiter, and it was kind of an aha moment there for me because she talked about how Lassiter is really a travel company. A winery is a travel company. One, you have people visiting to the winery, but also that the juice in the bottle is an experience. It's like a bottled travel experience. You're taking the vineyard to the person, and I
we
like
talk
it.
about that big time in our company, and that is so important. you know and the experience doesn't start with the wine, right? The experience starts when somebody latches onto our brand and they make a reservation to come and see us, and how our website looks and feels, and how the person answering the phone um, reacts to that person, and makes them feel welcome. I mean, wine, look, we do this for a living, right? People are like, oh man, you know so much about wine. Well, outside of wine and food, I don't know that much, right? Because this is what I do every single day, And like, you ask me about apples, and like, oh, I got about five varieties for you. That's about it. But with wine, it's something that is my passion of my life. But if we can build those experiences for somebody when they come on our property and when they leave, and then also the huge challenge is like, how does somebody have an amazing experience that's remarkable with your wine on a restaurant list or on a shelf?
Mhm.
At a retail shelf or in a wine shop. And we work very, 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 very deeply with our outside sales team to really make sure that all of our folks handling our wine have some tools that they're equipped with to better sell, not better sell, but better tell that
Mhm.
story, and help give that experience. And ultimately, we want them to come to Mecca, right? We want
Uh-huh.
them to come to the winery and be able to share that experience. But then that happens virtually too. I mean, we do so many virtual tastings, connecting with our fans, and that's been a wonderful experience as well.
Yeah, how have you crafted your virtual tastings? I'm always curious about that.
Well, we crafted them out of necessity because I started we started our company with $40,000 in American Express, and that's no
Mhm.
bullshit, and
Uh-huh.
we didn't come from money. I would have made a great trust fund kid,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, it was not. And I was lucky enough to meet one of my best friends, Bill Blackmon, in the William part of William Chris, and away we went. We were making wine for other people and growing grapes for other people,
Mhm.
and quite frankly, we didn't think that the people we were selling grapes to, or the folks that were making wine. I was making wine at a place that didn't always have the opportunity to share the best experience with people,
Mhm.
and also the places where we work sucked. Our bosses were kind of assholes, and
Yeah.
we thought, we kind of said we want to start this company for two reasons: to share with people what the amazing areas of Texas taste like, and to have a badass place for people to work. And those still ring true. That is our mission. Right now, our mission it continues to be grow a good life. And the growing the good life for our fans and for our team, and for our investors too. And I mean, I'm an investor, right? I mean, so that's something that's really important for our community and for our fans and for our team, to grow the good life.
I love
That's
that.
it.
So in the pre-show, we kind of talked about intent and why they would want to start a winery. A lot of times it's thinly veiled hubris, and they just want to get their name on a label. But talk to me about intent for a bit.
So intention is something that I firmly believe in. It has really guided my life. And I'm so grateful I ran into intention at a young age and started to understand it more and more. And we try to be very intentional with every action that we do. And we try to create more intentional people. And I feel like through the wine business, like, people have said, oh, you should get into politics. I'm like, absolutely not. I'd be a terrible politician, and they're like, well, don't you want to change the world? I'm like, I feel like we do every day. When we can teach people about where their food comes from and why when they spend $1 with us, what we do with that dollar, and reinvesting in our community and reinvesting in our team and reinvesting in the land and having good practices that can help our state, help our community, help our world be a better place by intentional purchases, right? If we can share with somebody, hey, every bottle, knowing where that wine comes from and knowing how it's made and know how that company treats that value proposition, excuse me, is huge. And we can create intentional people through our company, which kind of sounds a little crazy, and it probably is a little crazy, but it's something that I really love. And I think that, as a business owner, it's really important to have intention and know what you want to happen that day and know what you want to happen that year and with your business. And I think it's really important. And a lot of business owners, in my opinion, don't see that. They're like, and I quite frankly, I didn't really either at the very beginning. I just was like, people would say, what do you want to do? And I'm like, man, I want to make badass wine. So what does that look like? Well, we take badass grapes, put it in a badass barrel, and then like put some badass packaging around it. And then we got a badass wine, right? Quickly you kind of like, okay, I checked that box, I did it. And so then what? Now what? And, I think for us, it's about changing, making the world a better place through our wine. And that includes our team, and that includes our fans. And, that's that intention, starting off with what you want the end result. Unfortunately, with businesses, you either die, you sell it, or you give it to your kids, or you take a BK, right? Hopefully one of those three happens, and you're not escaping selling or giving it to your kids, or selling it to your employees, or dying, right? One of those three is going to happen. And so building a company, in my opinion, what we strive for is to build a company that's going to be around for the next 100 years. And that's how we make those decisions. And, like you said earlier, Drew, I've seen so many companies or so many folks, they get back from France or Italy, and they're like doctors and lawyers and engineers, and they're like, I want to start a winery. And how it happens sometimes in Texas is, people buy a really cool piece of property, and then they get with a label designer, and then they design what their brand is going to look like. And then they look at hiring some people, and at the very end they're like, wait, what do we, we gotta have some wine. It's kind of backwards, right? And then they're like, they don't understand what success looks like, and that hubris piece really plays into it. And I think that those brands are typically shorter lived, and some of them find intention and success, but most don't. And I think that ultimately,
what advice would you have for somebody that really hasn't found it? They may think they have it, but they're striving to find it. Where do you look?
Find out what a win looks like. I ask so many businesses, and I get to consult in other areas and deal and consult with wineries and vineyard partners. Like, what does a win look like? And they're like, so often the win is like to not die, right? To have a solvent business. And okay, well, what does a solvent business look like? Well, we want to break even. Well, do you really want to break even? Is that really what you want? Or do you want to be able to make money and be able to reinvest in your people and your team. You might find a bunch of people that will work for $12 an hour for 6 months, but that's not sustainable, right? You got to be able to give them raises. You got to be able to give people a path to grow, and you got to be able to provide health insurance, and all that takes planning. I mean, 5 years ago, we said we really want to have health insurance, and we're like, great, what does that look like? Holy shit, that's $250,000 a year. Now it's like $500,000, but at that time we we're like, all right, well, how do we make $250,000 more? Well, we put together a plan, and we started running our business with the intent to be able to afford health insurance, not this year, but next, like in 3 years, let's do it. And we started with paying a piece, and then now we pay a bigger piece, and now we're starting to pay for families health insurance. And it just takes a plan and sticking to that plan with intention, and making sure that every decision we make in the vineyard, okay, well, our company is always not we always don't make the most economical decision, right? But it's a balance. So we say, we understand that this is a hot vintage and we are actually going to remove some of our crop, but we're really trying to break into that Spectator top 100 list. We're really trying to be able to get national recognition and continue to compete in the world. So what does that take? We're really going to have to treat this vintage with intention and make sure that we're making the absolute best decisions possible in the vineyard, so we can then make the absolute best possible decision in the winery to make produce the best possible wine. And then we're going to have to provide our team with all the tools and the resources in our tasting room to be able to share that wine with intention. And that's all important. It's all a cycle.
Yeah, I think I had another aha moment. You're bringing out a lot of that in me, where I think a lot of people confuse a good idea with intention. Good ideas are easy, but without a plan to actually make it happen, it's not an intention.
Well, Drew, I'm great at the good ideas, and my team, they shoot down about 95% of them. They're like, wow, that sounds really cool, but how are we going to put that into action? And now my job is to not always be the guy with the great idea, but to foster a team that can create actionable items based on our strategic objectives, and to make sure that they know how to get there, to know what that strategic objective looks like, and make sure that they have the tools. And if they don't have the tools, my job is to find the tools and help them find the tools to be successful.
For sure.
We essentially run 5 different businesses, between a farming team, a winemaking team. We operate, 3 different production facilities, 2 different tasting rooms, soon to be 4. A whole wine club team, and our hospitality team is pretty extensive. And we have a whole culinary team as well at all of our locations.
Oh wow! And I mentioned the intro, 130 families you're supporting now. I mean, so really a good theme over the last at least 7 episodes. The last 7 episodes has been sustainability and employment sustainability. And the fact that you've got 130 families all with a pathway towards sustainable wages is very, very inspiring.
Well, thank you. It's been a long time coming, it's just it's our company stubbing its toe, and me being at the helm. We hired a bunch of people that were, early on we started with 1 employee and then have 3, and then you figure out, well, people don't want to just work on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They want to have a full-time job. So okay, we're gonna have to make a little bit more wine so we can be open 5 more days, 5 days a week. And then soon you're like, okay, we have to buy better equipment. Then now we're able to make a little bit more wine, and we're selling wine, so that's good. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, we made a little bit more wine. Now we have to be open 7 days a week. And then oh my gosh, it's this vicious cycle. That just mushrooms and mushrooms and mushrooms. And but I think it's really important to look at your team and ask them what they want. And if sometimes they don't know what they want, it's important to sit down and write it all out and look at what a win looks like. And unfortunately, sometimes that is your team growing out of your company, and that's okay. And I think too many times business owners, and we've definitely been guilty of this, of trying to keep somebody that wants to go be a tasting room manager or a winemaker somewhere else, or continue climbing that ladder. And sometimes we can provide that next step for them, but sometimes we can't. And being able to take care of our team, not only financially, which we are, one of the best paying companies in our area, but we're not the best. There's plenty of people that have, gotten nice salaries, 30, 40%, 50% jumps, working outside of our company. And more often than not, 2-3 years later, they come back and say, hey, the grass is greener on the other side because it's been fertilized with bullshit. And we also haven't, we haven't always made the world-class decision with some of our team members, and as far as giving them the coaching and the mentorship and the tools they need to be successful. And that's really my passion, is to make sure, not only to make the best wine in the world, but to support our team as well, and giving people a living wage, and that's a moving target, especially with inflation. And another piece that we recently rolled out to our company, and an advice that I would give to the rest of business owners, is real financial transparency throughout the company. And that was a big pill for me to swallow, because I felt, oddly about that I wasn't sure that, all of the company had maturity to be able to handle our business goals and our financial goals. And I recently reached out to a mentor of mine. I was talking to him, and he was like, well, do you think your team doesn't make up numbers in their head?
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck me, I never thought about that. So you might as well give them the real numbers.
Yes.
And we recently did a pie chart and showed where every single penny out of every single dollar goes. And we have this little bitty sliver that's in our growth, right? And then this huge part of the pie that's more like that is our payroll, right? And so we recently did that, and our company was just like, with every single person in our company, and they were just overjoyed to see that. And they're like, wow, we thought that. And I'm like, you guys have been in my house. It's not like I don't live in the Taj Mahal. I live in a little, humble household.
Well, they see so much on the internet of like Bezos and CEOs and salaries and disparity that they have to.
Yeah.
It's better just to crystallize it. What was some of the, like, in general, like the kind of the misconceptions and the response after you became transparent with the finances?
People didn't know that we spent so much money on payroll and like what health insurance costs. And then I think that people didn't understand how much wine production really costs. And, they hear numbers floating around in the hallways, but now we're like, hey, anytime you want to look under the hood, it's here for you. Like, we try not to, we're not like printing these out so where everybody can look at our, financial statements, however, anytime somebody wants to look under the hood, it's, but it's important to also know, like, hey, we're trying to make this goal happen. And that financial piece is just one leg on the stool. It's not everything, but it is a very important leg on the stool. And then, this is, with this money, this is how we're growing the company. And that includes, right now we pay 50% of somebody's health insurance for their family, if not just the individual. Well, I sure as hell like to get to 100%. Here's the steps in doing that. Here's what we're going to have to produce as a company. A big part of that is on our last engagement survey, which I highly recommend every company doing that as an engagement survey. And you can do that outside. You hire a consultant to do an engagement survey and figure out how engaged your team really is. And there was about 15 responses out of 100 that were like, man, our company is so dialed in on reoccurring revenue on wine club membership. Well, pulling out, hey, you know what, our tasting rooms actually aren't that profitable. Just with the bottles that we sell and the level of experience that we provide, we have a full suite of education. We're WSET certified testing center. We have classes that we're teaching. We invest so much in education. Well, that helps us create better, more educated, more qualified people. Well, all these pieces go into this bigger pie of when we have reoccurring revenue that we can project and count on, then that helps our company grow. And it was like, man, I had no idea. Now I see it. Now I get it. Now I understand why it's really important that we especially take our wine club members into extra consideration every chance we get, from the winemaker walking across the parking lot and saying hello, or asking if people want to go on a tour, or, at 3 o'clock when you said the same shit over and over and over again in the tasting room, like dig deep and figure out how can I give the best experience that I possibly can, or, it all counts.
Absolutely. Shifting the topic from growing out your staff to the choices you had to make in your vineyard expansion up to 90 acres. Did it happen just by chance, or was there a deliberate plan for that growth?
So one of our we call it the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals is, we know that our farming team is the best in the state, and our production team has over 100 years of experience growing grapes in Texas. And while we buy grapes from 33 other Texas families at present, some of the best quality year in and year out is the vineyards that we farm. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, a big part of our strategy is value creation in our assets. Mm. So we are doing a great job at supporting the marketing efforts of our vineyards that we buy grapes from, and also our vineyards in-house. Today, we only farm about 30% of our production. And, for the William Chris Vineyards brand, it's about 45-50% of our own production goes into to our brand, William Chris Vineyards, but Lost Draw is a little bit less than that. But we'd like to get to a point so we're farming 70 or 80% of our own production. And the reason we want to get there is to create value in long-term assets. We want to be not only holding that land, but also being able to control the whole process from front to back to really drive quality. And that's not to say that our growing partners aren't great, because they are. And we do a deep dive every vintage and looking back at a number of different factors and grading all our vineyards and determining, do we want to continue with this vineyard partner, or do we want to move to a different direction? And a lot of it has to do with efficiency. 5 years ago, we had 30 partners that were spread out all over creation. I mean, we farm in 4 counties, and then we buy grapes from all edges of the state. And that's a lot of travel time. That's a lot of logistics. I mean, we buy half of our production from greater than 4 hours away. Mm-hmm. And so managing that is super expensive. Obviously, this year is going to be a real kick in the pants because of fuel costs and transportation. And we're in our vineyards. I mean, every
Texas
week.
For fuel costs and not California. You're paying $8 a gallon.
No, but $5.50 for diesel. I just filled up my truck for $172 yesterday. So it's just like, oh my gosh. And it used to cost $72. So, but all that is like a greater, and it's been hard. I mean, I was actually talking to a winery, a winemaker this morning, who's going out to a farm that we used to buy grapes from, who I love these people like so incredibly much. They were a great part of our story. However, 3 acres in the wrong direction or we buy about 7 acres in 2 lots. But like, even though the grapes were good, even though they were very nice people, we had to start making decisions around efficiencies and economics. And just because you've done something that's worked in the past doesn't mean you need to look forward. You don't need to look forward and then try to tie everything together. So we're trying to farm in more centrally located areas and the highest quality areas, setting us up for success. Weather's a bitch in Texas, so being able to put our farms in the best spots possible, is really important in growing the right varieties.
Sure. Now, as far as the varieties in the vineyards, talk to me a little bit about the 5 brands and the philosophy behind segmenting them. I'm always curious on some of these wineries that do choose to segment with brands. Talk to me about that.
So a little bit of that was not out of happenstance, but we merged or acquired another winery a couple of years ago, one of my best friend's brands, and he rolled all his interest into our company. So we're all one big happy family. That was for a couple of different reasons. The biggest one is sustainability. At the time, I was not quite half owner in the company, and I had an aging partner. who's amazing. He's still one of my best friends to this day. We have a great relationship. But he was looking at every vintage. We take everything we've had and pour it back into vintage. And he was 66 at the time. And, and he's like, hey, at some point, I would like to see, a little bit of return on this investment, and so we looked at what is the possible inroads?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we kept on growing at the rate we were growing, in 5 years, the cost to buy the company, if he wanted to sell, would have been crazy, right? And I don't think I could have got the financial support in order to do that. So it's really important that we started talking about how we could buy him out and how we could create the future to where, and if I couldn't buy him out, what would have happened? Well, we would have put the company up for sale, or had to take on another large investment from a lot of other people. And then the question marks start to rise of like, what happens to the company? Do the people have sustainability, or are they going to have jobs? Is somebody going to run the company like we anticipated? It just creates a lot of ambiguity. And so we started putting together a plan. And then I looked at Lost Straw Cellars, which was one of my best friends, Andrew Sides, and I had a little canned wine company, canned wine brand on the side, a little side hustle, if you will. Right. And we loved working together. He's one of my best friends. And we looked at, he's in the same boat. His father-in-law and his uncle were his two partners. And what happens, if they can continue to grow? He's in the same boat. He might have been a couple of years behind where I was, but not very far. And so we started putting together a plan. We started being very open and transparent with our partners, and they're like family already. So the deal was very complicated, but it had to be a win-win. It had to be a win for everybody. And I'll give my hats off to all of our partners because they were very gracious in putting together this deal that worked for everybody. And so in a single instant, we had Lost Straw Cellars, which is a heavy direct-to-consumer brand. And then they had a secondary brand called Grower Project, which is really cool. And they had, Andrew had started that with Ray Wilson, who's an awesome winemaker down the road too. And so we also had a secondary brand called Skeleton Key, which is how we had planned to get health insurance. And Skeleton Key, you can just buy on property if you know about it, but mostly it's sold to retail. And it's kind of that 500 series in our portfolio. It's kind of that starter wine, and retails from $20 to $25, and is on restaurant lists across the state and New York and Chicago and all that other good stuff. So those are the brands that we're really expanding on the wholesale footprint. Well, William Chris Vineyards brand, is kind of at its peak, if you will. We're not trying to shove 10,000 more cases into production. We've got a lot of really great old vineyards that are producing really great wines, and so we're kind of, the sculpture is almost done there, if you will. And then Lost Straw Cellars, we're actually building a new location right down the road at another one of our farms. They're somewhat landlocked in a very urban winery, so we're going to be retrofitting the old facility there into maybe a more portfolio tasting, so where somebody can go and visit and taste all of our portfolio and then be directed out to our tasting rooms and wineries out kind of a little bit more in the rural areas. So
now, are the different brands, are they all made at a common production facility? I know you're building another one for Lost Straw, but are they separate or all under a common facility when it comes to vinification?
It's all convoluted. We have one cellar team that is, has a GM of the cellar, or a director of production, who manages all of our cellar activities. However, William Chris Vineyards has Tony O'Feel, who's our winemaker, and I'm definitely super involved in the winemaking process still. I've been the executive winemaker, position that I always had a lot of disdain for, but that seems to be where I land these days. Tony leads all of our production. We definitely collaborate on so many different aspects on the William Chris Vineyards brand, but he and I do the William Chris Vineyards brand and Skeleton Key, and then Brad and Andrew, Brad Buckaloo, our director of production, is also a winemaker for Lost Draw Cellars, and Andrew's kind of in that same position I am. I don't, I provide some sort of collaboration on the Lost Draw brands, but that's not my baby. That is definitely Brad and Andrew's baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cellar team has a whole host of different work orders, totally separate production, but some William Chris wines are made at the Lost Draw facility just due to lot size. And then some Lost Draw wines are made at the William Chris facility. We have one bottling line with the whole company at present, so everything comes back to roost and gets bottled at William Chris. And then we have an offsite barrel facility a couple miles away that has tanks and barrels, and we manage about 5,500 barrels these days. So it's a big job.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. No, there always seems to be some sort of convolution when you deal in multiple locations, multiple brands. Did have one guest that was building an entire facility in Reno to consolidate their Oregon, Washington, and California production, where the land was cheaper. It was just easier to get it all over there.
I could definitely see the benefit of that. And, right now we pay almost $400,000 a year in rent, in some of our facilities. And, as soon as we've got the plan to, really build into our own, we're kind of thinking like a 50,000 square foot location where we can centralize at least all of our red production. And then we may put white production at a different facility. But right now it works the way we do it. Sometimes it's banging our head against the wall, how to make everything fit. But that hasn't changed in 10 years. So I figure if we had a 50,000 square foot facility in one place, we still would be banging our heads against the wall. Yeah.
That kind of leads me into growth and your chance to kind of open up your crystal ball. The Hill Country has grown so much in the last 15 years from when he started. Where do you see Texas grape growing and winemaking going in the next 15 years? Or where would you like to see it go if you could craft it?
those may be two different things. Yeah. But, I got to take my hat off to all of my buddies out there. There's so many, 10 years ago, and even maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when my friends would come into town and they're like, man, where should we go tasting? And I'd be like, all right, go to these 3 places and you try this wine here. Now go to this place and try this wine here. And, because they, half the wineries 6-7 years ago would have like maybe 1 or 2, pretty awesome wines, and then a couple of dumpster fires, and now I tell you what, like if you come to the Hill Country, there's so much great wine to taste. Of course, I love our brands, but man, our neighbors are doing a great job. There's so many cool brands out there with Ab Astris, Adegavino, Lewis Wines is killing it, Sandy Road, Ronnie. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's so many good brands within a 20-minute drive of the Hill Country, and there's more coming in. And what is kind of, I'm not the wine police. I wish they would ask me to be the sheriff of wine. I really do. There's a lot of West Coast companies that are coming in and starting to come in and, just literally open up a tasting room, which I think is so stinking dumb. It's like, so you're going to just take a tasting room and plop it in the middle of Texas wine country and do nothing but sell your California wine or your Washington wine or your.
That's weird. I had no idea.
Yeah, and so, but for every one of those people, there's 2 or 3 really good families coming in. And let me preface this whole thing. There's some people that I really respect that are. There's another guy right down the road, Untamed. He's worked in California for years, and he's bringing grapes in and producing. Almost all California wines, and they're really nice and good business. So I'm not dogging on them. I just think that unless you have a plan to actually farm grapes and make wine here, or at least make Texas wine, like what the heck are you doing here? Like, like seriously, we have some places that sell South African wine, and I'm like, who the hell wants to come to Texas to drink South African wines? Like, why don't you just start a tasting room in downtown Austin or something?
Yeah.
And of course, that's just my opinion. So I don't want to speak for all of the Texas wine industry. And a lot of the industry 10 years ago and even 5 years ago was predicated on bringing a lot of bulk wine in and just,
Mhm.
slapping a picture of a Longhorn on it and,
Yeah.
calling it Texas wine, which is bullshit.
Mhm.
Um, but I think where I'd like to see the industry go and where I think the industry is going, there's a lot more folks that are planting grapes, and we've got to, I think, in order for the industry to grow in the direction that I think is most beneficial for sustainability and longevity, we've got to connect more winemakers with growing grapes,
Mhm.
which I know it sounds so simple, but a lot of folks started with very little money or started with nothing, and we're buying grapes 3 hours, 4 hours away, and going
They
to
start.
visit
They
the
started
vineyard.
with a label instead of the vineyard from the
Exactly,
from a
and
final
and
product
that's
instead of the raw materials.
exactly, and that's my sincere wish for
Mhm.
the whole industry, and not only in Texas but everywhere, but especially in Texas because it's my home. Um, is that more and more winemakers and winery owners find that intentional piece, and I think it's always fascinating to somebody will go take a weekend course and then be like, well, looks like we're making wine now and putting in a vineyard. And it's like, what if your fucking cardiologist did that? Was like,
Yeah.
well, I took a 6-week course and I'm feeling pretty good about it. How about yourself?
Yeah.
Let's cut you open. You know,
You can be the first
so
patient.
yeah, right. But ultimately, I'm just commending. I need to commend all of our area. There's so many great wineries opening up that I tell you what, some of them too. I go taste and like, shit, boys, we gotta turn it up a notch. These guys
That's
are
good.
on our heels, man. They're making great wine, and let's go, let's compete. Because when I go to New York and carry my bag around, I want 10 of my buddies there too.
Mhm.
I
A little
want
friendly
to start,
competition.
let's carry the torch, and we've got to be able to share more Texas wine, not only in Austin and Houston and Dallas. I mean, four of the biggest markets in the United States,
Mhm.
but we've got to own those markets and then continue growing out to New Orleans and Kansas City and San Francisco.
Mhm.
And are we going to own the wine list in San Francisco? No, but we should build the Texas wine section there.
Hey.
And we've got to do that by making super high quality Texas wine. We've got something to prove.
Absolutely. As we're kind of winding down here, talking about shout outs, shout out to a lot of people who's doing it right now, or who do you want to give a thank you to?
Oh man, you know what? That's a great question. I think a couple of years ago, you know, our goal was to be the best winery in Texas, and I feel like we arguably got there, and right, and all of our teams like, okay, now that we're somewhat in that top realm, what what's that next? Where are we going? And I had a business advisor at that point, or mentor, and he said, well, what companies do you really respect? What companies, if you had to go look at what company did it right, and and I kind of came back. I went to the lab and started writing, and I kind of came up with this version of the companies that I respect the most. Like if you can take um, Tablas Creek and how they've built
Favorites.
their like this amazing. They don't try to be anything that they're not, and they own their vision. And I just appreciate that so much. I love what the guys at Ridge have done over the years and just stayed so true and withstood the test of time. I know they've been bought and sold and all that good stuff, but they're still establishing like these great wines and have such a great following. And then if you can wrap it all in a bow with what Yvon Chouinard has done at Patagonia. I don't agree. I don't agree with him totally on his politics all the time. However, I really appreciate how they've built their company, and so I kind of use that model a little bit. If you can kind of wrap all those up and then make it your own. It's just definitely the companies that I respect that try to model what we're gonna who we are becoming, and I think there's also so many other great wineries out there that I just love that to see them pushing up the bar, and pushing the envelope. And I think that we all have a lot to learn from each other. And so I try to be as transparent and an open book on all of our wine production methods and all that good stuff, and vineyard management as well.
Yeah, that's a great amalgamation. Tablas Creek Ridge wrapped around Patagonia. That's an idea.
This is all the crazy shit that goes on in my head. So
no, I saw it. I'm a big fan of all three. Club members at Tablas. I'm actually heading up there in a couple weeks.
Same. So
now, well, Chris, where can people find out more about you and your brands?
So definitely go to williamchriswines.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Lost Straw Cellars, William Chris Vineyards. You can follow me personally at IGHYETX. You'll see pictures of all the dumb stuff I do, and hunting and fishing, and trips with my kids, and lots of grapes and wine. But that's HYE or IGHYETX, William Chris Vineyards, Lost Straw Cellars. You can follow our new brand to Uplift, which is or Uplift Wines, which is you'll see start to release at one of our farms. It's right on the Llano Uplift, a really cool geological formation. But if you go to our website, williamchriswines.com, you can actually see the whole portfolio, excuse me, at the top. And so you can toggle to all of our websites very easily from williamchriswines.com. And definitely like us on Facebook, all that good stuff. We do tons of stuff online and social media, and we have a really great marketing team in that sense. So
awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Drew, it was a pleasure, man. I hope your listeners find what they're looking for, and hope this helps cup their flame a little bit, and helps them share intention with the world. And I appreciate the time today and the visit.
Oh, a lot of things to think about from this episode. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and this is all my opinion, so don't take it out in the world and say, well, Chris said that.
Not a financial advisor.
No. So thanks, Drew. I appreciate you.
And you have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.